Hi, everyone, this is the Encyclopedia Channel. This program will interpret the book for you. It is The Heart of the Fight, co-authored by American marriage counseling expert Judith Wright and her husband, educator Bob Wright. Quarrel. In many countries and regions, when couples and lovers get along, they advocate mutual humility, harmony, discuss everything, be polite and don't quarrel. However, the authors of this book, the Wrights, did the opposite and put forward a jaw-dropping theory. If a husband and wife want to be happy for a long time, they must quarrel, and they must quarrel more. So why do fights boost intimacy and happiness? What are the pervasive misconceptions about intimacy and happiness? How to quarrel healthily? What skills can solve the problems that arise on both sides, repair and upgrade this intimate relationship? After listening to this episode, I hope everyone can improve their ability to get along with each other in intimate relationships. Why is this? The author believes that based on their personal experience in getting along and engaging in marriage counseling for many years, they have come to a conclusion: learning to quarrel correctly between partners can effectively strengthen mutual intimacy and trust. Couples who have real, angry arguments tend to be happier later on. The short-term discomfort that comes with angry and honest communication is more conducive to long-term stability of the relationship. Although quarrels bring anger and mutual attacks, showing the ugly side of each other, but it can also stimulate people's insight and understanding, and make both partners aware of their own shortcomings and each other's needs, so that they can be exposed early and resolved problems, and remove the hidden dangers that undermine the long-term relationship between the two. So, why do we always feel that quarreling is an ugly behavior that hurts feelings, destroys relationships, and is ugly for couples? The author said that this is because we have a big misunderstanding about the definition of intimacy and marital happiness. Why? Next, we will divide it into two parts to interpret the main content of this book. In the first part, following the author's train of thought, let's talk about what is this common misunderstanding about intimacy and happiness, and what wrong concepts and behaviors it will make us form in choosing a spouse and getting along with each other. In the second part, how the Wrights use the techniques they summed up to turn seemingly destructive quarrels into pressure relief valves and boosters that enhance the intimate relationship between partners and make progress together. First part. At the beginning of the book, Judith showed her own experience, saying that there were often frank and fierce quarrels between herself and her husband Bob, which made her marriage counselor doubt whether the two of you were going to divorce. So Judith said in the book that in fact, people around him were misled by this appearance. He and Bob loved each other and never thought of divorce. As for quarreling, that is the challenge necessary to enjoy a real, sustainable intimacy. It is a bold and authentic model of how couples get along. It is not the same cautious, unable to express their opinions that most couples or lovers follow. The relationship is quite different, but more scientific and more reliable. Why do many couples don't want to fight? Judith and Bob said in the book that this is because they have one of the biggest misunderstandings about intimacy and marriage. That is, after establishing an intimate relationship or getting married, we can fall into a kind of once and for all realm of happiness. Just like the fairy tales we often read when we were young, the so-called from then on, the prince and princess lived a happy life. But, unfortunately, real life is completely different from fairy tales. After the establishment of an intimate relationship or a marriage relationship, we will find that it is far from an end of happiness, but a node that opens a new stage of life. Although we will have new happiness and surprises, we will also find that for the two-person world, there are new goals ahead, as well as new troubles and new contradictions, which need to be solved and overcome by two people. Conflict means disagreement, and negative and angry emotions breed between partners. However, because of misunderstandings about intimacy, many people refuse to admit conflicts and refuse to communicate directly and honestly. This kind of communication often manifests itself as quarrels. In their view, quarreling is tantamount to announcing that the quality of the relationship has declined, or even broken, which leads to problems piling up like a snowball, and eventually leads to a breakup. Judith and Bob said in the book that, in fact, this kind of superficial harmony caused by avoiding conflict is also a kind of passive quarrel, which can neither solve the problems between two people nor deepen the relationship between them. Conversely, although direct quarrels may seem ugly and harmful, Their essence is to allow partners in an intimate relationship to communicate and understand each other in an extreme way, and to discover each other's needs, so as to take the first step towards improvement. Step. To put it bluntly, the unrealistic vision of happy once and for all, the hidden connotation behind it is that we will live in a way that is not subject to any test, without going through the brain, and always maintain the status quo, and we also hope that the relationship will heat up. Judith and Bob said that this false perception can make us instinctively avoid conflicts in intimate relationships, avoid arguments, and refuse to be honest with our partners. However, this is of no avail. When contradictions accumulate to a certain extent, they will inevitably explode in an unprecedented form. In the eyes of these people who hold the view of happiness once and for all, there is a serious gap and tear between this ugly and cruel status quo and their imagined vision. Therefore, they have neither the ability nor the willingness to repair or correct this intimate relationship. Instead, they choose a seemingly simple solution: end this relationship, continue to bring their own unrealistic fantasies to find the next relationship. Next, Judith and Bob listed in detail for us under the wrong vision of once and for all happiness, we will go astray in our spouse selection and daily life. Individual. First, we feel that as long as we have an intimate relationship, we must be happy. Second, we feel that to love someone, we must accept each other as they are without changing. But in fact, there is a term in psychology called Michelangelo phenomenon, which means that when an intimate relationship is in a benign state, two people will exert influence on each other. If you are willing to work hard for each other to become a more good, people also inspire their partners to make the same effort. On the other hand, if one party is stuck in the way and does not seek to change, the final outcome is often either that the other party feels that there is no future and eventually breaks up, or that the two are forced to torture each other in a low-quality relationship. Third, we feel that a relationship has gone wrong simply because we haven't found the right person, that so-called soulmate that pop culture keeps promoting. Fourth, we feel that romance and compatibility are very important in a relationship. But in fact, romantic feelings cannot last for too long, so they cannot be used as a bond to maintain long-term intimate relationships. Secondly, a good intimate relationship is not closely related to the compatibility between two people, that is, the so-called common hobbies and personality characteristics, etc., and a truly happy couple can handle the differences between the two parties well, grow together in tolerance. So, how to avoid these minefields in getting along? Judith and Bob said, first of all, they must fundamentally change their wrong positioning and expectations of intimacy. If you use a fairy tale as a metaphor, it means that after the prince and princess are together, what they usher in is not a happy once and for all, but a brand new adventure into the dark forest. In this adventure, they will cover each other, fight side by side, and upgrade to fight monsters. The intimacy between them is also more real and stable because of this adventure. In this book, Judith and Bob cite a case they encountered in their marriage counseling work. There is a couple, Gina and Riley, who are both in good condition and good-looking. People seem to be a beautiful couple like a princess and prince. However, with the end of the honeymoon period, the passion of both parties is waning. Gina feels that Riley's character is very arrogant and deliberately keeps a distance from herself. The frequency is decreasing, so I am actively looking for extramarital affairs. Under the guidance of Judith and Bob, Gina and Riley gradually realized that the passionate state of the honeymoon period must never go back, but the relationship itself can still be salvaged. Thus, the couple began to face real life honestly. The improvement of the relationship first started by increasing the joint activities of the husband and wife, enriching the common life experience and topics, and then transitioned to daring to quarrel, facing the needs of the other party and the flaws in their own characters, and start trying to change. In this series of long and arduous counseling and healing, Gina and Riley also discovered the source of their own personality defects. A considerable part of the reason is the wrong concept instilled in them by their original family environment. The concept obtained from the elders is that a woman cannot bring you all happiness. Therefore, after realizing this, the couple began to deliberately jump out of the original thinking mode, and they could quickly understand each other's needs through less intense quarrels and meet them. Therefore, although this relationship has not returned to the ideal state of the princess and the prince will be happy forever, it has become pragmatic and healthy. The second part. In the previous part, we learned that once an intimate relationship is formally established, it is not a static and smooth state of happiness, but full of contradictions and dissatisfaction. So quarrels are an indispensable pressure relief valve in marriage, or vaccines to preserve resistance. But seeing this, some people may have to ask, they don't have the author's rich knowledge of gender psychology and sufficient experience in communication. My relationship is messed up, what can I do? Don't panic, Judith and Bob have summed up 5 tips on how to turn conflict into happiness for you, and teach you how to quarrel with your partner healthily and make changes. The first technique is called awakening desire. It means that through quarreling, discover each other's real needs. I believe that many people have this experience. Couples quarrel, sometimes the fuse is some trivial things, such as dirty clothes not put in the laundry basket, toothpaste not covered after use, forgetting to take out the trash, and so on. But we often have to think a little more at this time. What emotions and needs are hidden behind the other party's anger? First of all, what the other party wants is definitely not a simple result. For example, if the dirty clothes are put away, the toothpaste lid is closed, or the garbage is thrown into the trash can downstairs, it is over. If this is the case, simply hiring hourly workers is equivalent to solving all the problems of the couple. Not only that, even if the other party deliberately changes his living habits under your anger and pressure, and does these small details well, the two of you still won't feel deep satisfaction from the bottom of your heart. What is the reason? In fact, behind these little things, there are hidden desires in our hearts that are not satisfied by the other party, that is, the desire to be heard, respected, cared for by our partner, and the desire to be able to express ourselves so that we can have an impact on the common life of two people, help it takes it to the next level, blah blah blah. As Judith and Bob say in the book, at the end of the day, behind every argument, there are unfulfilled longings, and once satisfied, these longings become the basis of intimacy and fulfillment. Therefore, if you want to turn a quarrel into a healthy and constructive communication, you must always analyze what desire your partner wants to express during the quarrel. Conversely, if you don't understand why you're fighting, you'll just end up in a vicious cycle of revenge and resentment. So, if you think of an intimate relationship as a self-driving cross-country trip between two people, then the inner desire of the two people is the GPS navigation system that guides this journey. Bob Wright recalled that after he and Judith got married, although he had worked hard to be a competent husband, the bad influence of his native family still persisted in him, and he began to show a strong sense of self-confidence in his marriage. Desire to control everything, such as stipulating that Judith must clean up the kitchen and cook according to his own plan, so quarrels naturally occurred, and Judith complained to Bob, "You are just like your parents." At first, Bob felt that his wife was just hurting him on purpose, but he also found a marriage counselor later, and Bob discovered that behind his desire to control, there was actually an unsatisfied desire, that is to be with his wife. Judith generates more connection, generates more intimacy. And Judith also analyzed that she and Bob quarreled in order to try to make her husband pay attention to, listen to, and understand herself. In this way, both partners identify the hidden longing behind the other's anger, and the intimacy is taken a step further. Likewise, Judith and Bob once hosted a counseling couple, George and Rita. George is obsessed with cleanliness and likes to keep his house in order, but Rita is the complete opposite, and the two quarrel over this matter. Finally, during the consultation, George expressed his desire. It turned out that George grew up in a disharmonious family and grew up in an environment lacking order and security, so the messy environment directly triggered his latent psychological trauma, reminded him of his unhappy childhood. Knowing this, Rita also spoke frankly about her desire, because she had mistakenly believed that George's attention to neatness overwhelmed his attention and love for himself. Therefore, after the husband and wife had a frank exchange, Rita no longer continued her willfulness, but chose to work with her husband to maintain the cleanliness of the family environment. Of course, during the quarrel, because our emotions are too intense, the cerebral cortex, which is responsible for processing complex information, is temporarily closed, and the brainstem with the simplest function is responsible for controlling it, so it is very likely that we cannot carry out complex analysis and thinking to identify our partner what exactly is longing for. Therefore, the author reminds us that the review after a quarrel is very important. At this time, your emotions gradually calm down, and the cerebral cortex becomes active again. You can write down a universal sentence on paper: I hope something will happen, so what results can be achieved, to analyze your deep-seated desires, such as I hope the other party can be punished, so that the other party can understand my feelings. What is reflected behind this is that you desire to get the other party's attention, understanding, sense, and protect. In the 4th chapter of this book, the authors Judith and Bob list a very detailed desire list to analyze our various specific desires, which correspond to the desires in intimate relationships. I believe that after reading it, you will be able to make a roughly accurate judgment on your own situation. Next, the second tip for keeping your partner's arguments positive and healthy is close and positive interaction. Speaking of this, many people will say, it's not difficult, my partner and I communicate a lot every day, talking about everything, it's almost to the point of chatterbox. However, as Judith and Bob said, not all communication between partners is positive interaction. In fact, if we analyze carefully, many exchanges between us and our partners do not actually involve the core issues in the intimate relationship, but rather irrelevant information exchanges, such as gossip, news, family chores, etc., and may even be perfunctory, whining and complaining. So how do you define positive interaction? The author said in the book that only in the interaction, if you show your true self to your partner, effectively perceive and express your emotions, and satisfy your desire, can this be considered a positive interaction. At the same time, in order to maintain a positive interaction and not deviate from the direction, Judith and Bob also set up some small rules for us to follow when interacting and quarreling, such as being honest, acknowledging the facts, and always believing that the other party is out of good intentions. If the status quo is unsatisfactory, the other party is at most only half responsible, and so on. According to the author's statistics, the ratio of positive interaction to negative interaction is about 5-to-1 in happy and harmonious couples when there is a quarrel, while in the final divorced couple, the ratio is about 0.8-to-1. In the book, Judith and Bob cite a couple, Jack and Sadie, and describe how they went from ineffective, even destructive, communication efforts to positive interactions. Jack is busy at work and busy at home. At night, I hardly even bothered to talk to my wife. And Sadie took care of the children at home all day, feeling that her husband was indifferent to her hard work and dedication, and would not help her share it when she went home. Therefore, the period when Jack first arrived home became a time of high incidence of quarrels between the two. Sadie accused Jack of being indifferent to his situation, while Jack felt that he had worked hard all day, and what he would always face when he returned home was his wife's complaints and nagging. In order to escape from all this, the time for him to go home is getting later and later. After consultation, Sadie understood that what she really wanted was to be able to have her own value and career like an independent woman besides taking care of children, while Jack realized that what he wanted was to be able to work in a busy day. Finally, there is the encouragement and support of family members, as well as a stable environment. So, even if they fight again, they get out of the invalid pattern that starts with "you're always this and that," and "you're never this or that." Instead, they start acknowledging the fact that it exists, and stop putting the things that lead to bad relationships in the family. The responsibility is pushed to the other side. Jack learned not to bring home the bad mood of the office, and Sadie hired a nanny to help him with the children, so that he had a little leisure time every day. At the same time, the couple also increased their shared parent-child entertainment time and took turns telling their children bedtime stories. The intimacy of the whole family has been steadily improved through these practices. Next, Judith and Bob introduced this healthy arguing technique called disclosing questions. To put it bluntly, it is the first skill, understanding the mirror image correspondence of desire. That is to say, after understanding what our partner and our inner desires want, we start to introspect from the opposite direction to see what is our own desire. What deep-seated character flaws and psychological motivations lead to conflict? Having said that, the author introduces an interesting concept, saying that many disputes between intimate partners are actually triggered by unpleasant experiences encountered in childhood. These experiences are now embedded in our subconscious as implicit memories. Take, for example, the couple who came to Bob and Judith for advice. Michael, the husband, married Sally because he admired Sally's independence, even strength. But after a long time, after the passion faded, the two began to quarrel frequently. Michael kept accusing Sally of being self-centered and making himself angry. On the surface, Michael is angry because his wife's character is incompatible with him, but if you dig deeper into the reason for Michael's anger, you will find that Michael's father is a stubborn and self-willed person. Every time Sally showed stubbornness, it actually aroused Michael's subconscious fear and hatred of his father in childhood. This kind of trauma hidden in the subconscious was the real cause of the constant conflict between Michael and Sally. Our early experiences as infants and toddlers determine the underlying logic of our brain's thinking and responses. Counting from our birth, within the next 9 months, the development of our brain can be said to be explosive. At the peak, 20,000 new neurons can be generated every second. As the number of neurons increases, they begin to connect with each other and form a network, helping newborns gradually begin to understand the world around them and develop self-awareness. This network, called the belief matrix by the author, determines the underlying logic of our lifelong self-awareness and behavioral patterns. Specific to the application scenario of seeking a significant other, our belief matrix will require us to find a partner who can make up for our own shortcomings, has the qualities we envy, and can help us complete our growth tasks. However, if not handled properly, what drives partners to admire each other and decide to unite in the first place can also cause a rift or even separation between the partners in the end. This is because the growth tasks stipulated in our subconscious mind have not been completed because the thinking patterns we have formed since childhood have limitations and even negative effects. These are all stumbling blocks for us to achieve our goals. Michael, for example, because his father also played an important role as a provider in childhood, so his father's stubbornness and domineering, in Michael's subconscious mind, he was not only an object of rejection, but also associated with love and family affection. An unhealthy, even false connection. Therefore, when he meets the independent and assertive Sally, he will automatically put her into the ideal lover template in his mind. However, when there was friction between the two in life, the projection function in Michael's subconscious was activated again. What he hated was not his partner, but the domineering one deep in his heart that prevented him from expressing his autonomy and will. Father. So what should we do? It is said in the book that if the quarrel has aroused all kinds of hidden pains in my heart, then I need to share the injuries and shortcomings encountered in the process of growing up with my partner. This kind of honesty can not only eliminate misunderstandings caused by quarrels, but also increase the intimacy between you because of this sharing, and lay the foundation for further acceptance of each other. If necessary, professional psychological medical institutions can also be invited for treatment and intervention. The author said that although we can do nothing about the past, as adults, we need to constantly understand where our shortcomings are in intimate relationships, fill in these gaps, and continue to grow from where childhood development stagnated. As partners, you have a deep understanding of each other's desires and subconscious obstacles through active communication while arguing. So, how to solve the problem next? Repair and upgrade this intimate relationship. This leads to the fourth technique, to liberate oneself and rebuild the matrix. First of all, how to repair intimacy by liberating yourself. It doesn't mean doing things arbitrarily and doing your own way, but consciously breaking the old habits that limit you to be closer and more understanding with your partner. To put it bluntly, it is to bravely step out of that harmful comfort zone. The author mentions some specific methods in the book, such as taking the initiative to have an active quarrel when the conflict is not intensified, a new experience, such as changing the pace of life that two people already feel dull, developing a hobby that two people can experience together, and so on. If the purpose of liberating ourselves is to break down the barriers that hinder the upgrading of our intimate relationship, then it is time for us to establish a new set of behavior patterns that are optimized and iterative. Here is an important concept to mention, that is, the core of the treatment of psychological trauma is to establish a new and healthy psychological default path in the patient's brain consciousness to replace the original and abnormal default path, just like in a rough and uneven path. Next to the old highway, build a new, more spacious and flat road, which is the same as changing everyone's driving route. This article also applies to the application scenario of repairing and upgrading intimacy. However, it is not easy to establish a new psychological default path. It requires both partners to consciously practice frequently to form a tacit behavior pattern. First of all, please focus on observing your partner. If your partner has improved in the way of getting along, or wants to initiate positive communication, please respond clearly and enthusiastically, and give praise and encouragement. We know that the stability and regularity of the surrounding environment are important factors that make us feel psychologically safe. Therefore, such repeated practice can help my partner to establish a new thinking brain circuit. It turns out that my behavior can reap strong love and affirmation from my partner. Over time, the cerebral cortex can build a new behavior model based on this. In this book, Judith recalls that due to the unpleasant experience in her growing up, she formed a bad implicit memory, that is, she does not think that she is worthy of being loved, which leads to her husband Bob, although often affirmed and encouraged myself, but I didn't feel it at all. However, after counseling, she began to consciously capture and identify the positive messages sent by her husband in the communication, and finally gradually felt Bob's love and appreciation for her, thus gradually eliminating the incorrect evaluation of herself, and the relationship between husband and wife feelings are heating up at the same time. Secondly, rigidly prescribing a set of action plans for yourself is also a good way to establish a new psychological default path. In the book, the author gives an example of an active couple, Ed and Connie. In the past, once Ed did something that Connie didn't approve of, Connie would lose control and start a quarrel with the purpose of humiliating the other party. After consultation and treatment, Connie set a set of mandatory action plans for herself, starting with some specific application scenarios, such as if Ed is late, instead of being angry, I will hug him and tell him I miss him, and we'll talk about how to avoid being late later. If these specific action plans receive positive feedback from our partners during implementation and progress smoothly, we can gradually upgrade it and turn it into a set of application scenarios. More and more broad blueprints for action. Not only that, but in this process, you should also invite your partner to participate together and correspond every kind of unhappiness that has happened to our ideal response and resolution mode. For example, if I feel uncomfortable in my partner's communication again, if I'm angry, I stop right away, identify what it is I'm craving, and at the same time analyze what's triggering my undesirable psychological mechanism. Now, let's review the main content of this book. The authors, Judith and Bob, use their personal experience and cases encountered in marriage counseling for many years to show us a set of methodologies that take healthy quarrels as the key breakthrough point, can effectively maintain and upgrade intimate relationships. To briefly summarize, it is through healthy quarrels, maintaining active communication between partners, discovering each other's demands and hidden dangers in the relationship early, and then finding ways to solve them. Together, Judith and Bob point out that proper quarrels can be said to be the mine detectors, or safety valves, in marriage and intimacy. The reason why most people turn pale when they talk about it, and instinctively reject, fear and quarrel with their partners is because their expectations and perceptions of marriage and intimacy are wrong. In their eyes, happiness means static stop, once and for all. As long as you find the right partner, you can enjoy a kind of peaceful and constantly upgrading happiness from now on without any effort. However, the reality is that marriage and intimacy are like many life forms in the world. They are full of contradictions, struggles, and all kinds of defects since their birth. Only by constantly caring and upgrading them can they continue to grow. Constantly thriving. Of course, no matter how good theories and methods are, they must be practiced in order to be effective. In the second half of the book, the author emphasizes that these 4 skills for healthy quarrels and improving intimate relationships must be practiced and explored persistently by the partners in order to be effective. This is also similar to our call to be a lifelong learner. The authors suggest that many people rush into intimacy and marriage simply because they go with the flow. Let it be here is a derogatory term, which means that the couple lacks careful consideration and long-term planning, chooses to be together just because of convenience, and then mistakenly thinks that this kind of life that goes with the flow will continue. However, falling in love is easy, but getting along is too difficult. Just like craftsmen and athletes must constantly polish their skills, getting along is also a skill about love, which needs to be tempered and upgraded, and cannot be neglected. In the opinion of the author of this book, the first step to upgrade the skills of love is to start from positive and healthy quarrels. Only by exposing contradictions can we discover the desires and psychological defects in each other's hearts, and finally formulate a path to liberate ourselves and rebuild the belief matrix. This is the end of this episode of the show. What do you think about it differently? Welcome to leave a message to discuss with everyone. Hey, if you like our channel, please subscribe us. Haha, remember to like it.